All right, hi everyone, Tommy Alcoholic. It's good to be here this morning with all of you. I do have experience with these steps, and I meet group conscience. And I like to look around the room in every AA meeting I'm in. I like to think about the 12-step work that just went into one of us to be able to sit in the seat of AA, because I think sitting in the seat of AA is probably the first miracle that I participated in my sobriety. And the meeting is the aggregate of all the people and all the people that helped them and all that time together. And my ideal is that the meeting is a place that fosters an environment that makes sobriety possible. But it's also a safe place for a stumbling drunk to walk in, totally untreated, not knowing what to do, have a cup of coffee, and sit down and say, I want to be part of this thing, whether he meets group conscience or not. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, not a member of Big Book Step Study. I've never seen a Big Book Step Study membership listing. I've read our book, and it says we identify as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what I identify as. So again, I'm part of AA as a whole, and that's how I treat my relationship to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's probably what you're going to hear from me as a guy that has experience with the steps, but my main experience is being a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because that's what we are. We're Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is just one meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The fact that I've been through the steps, the fact that I do have experience, the fact that I've completed my amends, doesn't make me better than anyone who hasn't. It doesn't give me any more power than someone that hasn't. In fact, there's no more power in me to stay sober today than there was in the last day of my drinking. That power comes from somewhere else. What the steps allowed me to do is clear away the things that were blocking me from God. Would put me in a place to be able to maintain a sobriety date. So just a little about that so I can get to 6 and 7 so that way you know I'm alcoholic. Is that I actually had to drink to become alcoholic. Was I born with the allergy? I think so. Was I born with a predisposition to, generational alcoholism? Probably. But I actually had to drink and cross lines for the whole process of becoming an alcoholic to come about, which is I had the physical allergy, began to have the mental obsession, but it was the spiritual malady that I think makes me an alcoholic, and that separates me from a heavy drinker, separates me from someone that has problems with their drinking. It's that spiritual decay of drinking to a point where I've completed this cycle where I'm now hopeless, whether I'm drinking or not. And that's, for me, what I really think makes me an alcoholic. There's no chapter for someone that was born with this. There's no chapter for someone that suffered severe trauma. There's chapters about what happens to us when we drank, after we drank, and what it's like being sober. And for me, the intolerable part is being sober. And I suffer from that insanity that I think that the only thing that's going to fix this is a drink. And then I ultimately suffer from the hopelessness of knowing the drink's not fixing it, and I don't know what to do, but the only thing I can do now is drink. And I lived in that place very short periods of time, and Alcoholics Anonymous interrupted that. The first time it interrupted that was in 1990. I was a teenager. By this time, I was a high school dropout. I had been shot and stabbed. I was out of my house. And because of the trouble, the way I was living my life and what I was doing in my drinking, people brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I eventually sobered up, and I was sober from like 1990 to 94. And I had a relapse in there after about 9 months. I wanted the trouble to go away, and it did. But what I thought when the trouble went away, I could drink at safety again. And I tried that experiment. It lasted about a month. And then 3 years later, I ended up in the same situation. Life's going well, no pressing problems, going to tons of meetings, small attempts at the steps, but I'd never followed through with the latter steps. I had done some 4th and 5th steps, never followed through and stayed in the latter steps. So I wasn't recovering from alcoholism. What I did was I had seen some stuff because I wrote down some stuff and I shared that stuff. And I cleared up what was necessary in order for me to function in my day-to-day life, but I never went out and made my amends really, and I definitely wasn't living in 10, 11, and 12. So I reached a point where a drink made sense to me again somehow. And I remember taking that drink and thinking, like, am I ready to do this again? And I believed the lie that I was going to be okay, because I didn't have a full understanding of what alcoholism was. I had an understanding of what the trouble I got into while drinking was. And that drink lasted about 2.5 years. And I reached a different type of hopelessness in my drinking, in the things that was going on in my life. You know, the progression of my alcoholism is, I basically need to drink to the point where I feel like my heart and lungs are barely working. Like, that's where I like to get to. Almost unconscious, not feeling anything, and I can't work, I can't participate in the things in my life that are important, and I just really want oblivion. And that you got to live a pretty messed up lifestyle to maintain that, and that's what I was trying to maintain. And it was a different type of hopelessness, and I reached a point where I did get on my knees and I begged God to end this madness. And I felt relief. I had money, I had beers in the fridge, I had a large amount of heroin, and I wasn't hopeless and desperate in the way where I would normally end up on my knees. But I was on my knees nonetheless, begging God to end this madness. And nothing in my life changed those moments I was on my knees. But I've been sober since. The next morning I plan to go to a detox, and I should have been a little more specific when I asked God to end the madness, because the next morning the Boston Police, State Police, and DEA gave me a spiritual awakening. And I was getting sober whether I liked it or not. And but I ended up back in Alcoholics Anonymous and willing to look at things differently. And I found sponsorship. I got introduced to these meetings. They really weren't for me at first, but I kept getting introduced to them. And I met a guy that said, I'm not going to lie to you, I hated these meetings. I hated most of the people in them. And because I was just an angry nut from Southie that saw things in a certain way, in a certain light. And I kept getting led back to these meetings, and I met a guy who said, you're the perfect guy to be here, because you need to be here for the next guy that comes through these doors hating these meetings. He'll find you, I'm telling you, he'll find you. And so I ended up going through this work. And I took the inventory, I saw who I've been in this life without God, and I did that 5th step. And of course, at that time, at the 5th step, I know I'm going to be looking at 6 and 7. I had thousands of instances of where I fell short in my life because of my resentments, my fear, and my conduct. I saw ideals of how I looked at the world. One of the more important things that I focused on my inventory were principles and ideals. I learned that the fear, the resentment, whatever it may be, especially the earliest memories of them, they set in motion these principles of how I was going to believe the world was and how I needed to behave in that world for the rest of my life. I still respond like a child when I'm stuck in my character defects. I still respond in a fearful way. And my fears, one of the earliest principles I learned was if you punch someone in the face, they'll stop doing whatever you don't like. That's what I learned. I learned violence works as a man. I learned that aggression works. I learned that if you allow someone to walk all over you, people will walk all over you the rest of your life. And you know what? I never let people walk all over me. But I also never participated in life fully because I was always guarded and always pained. So I come to 6 and 7, not knowing what I know now in 6 and 7. I just follow the directions. And so, you know, I'll kind of go over this again. I answered to my satisfaction, you know, these questions, these returning home, you know. The emphasis on willingness is important to me because in order for there to be a willingness means that I know there's going to be some sort of resistance. If I need to be willing in some way, I know I have a natural resistance to something a natural order of things. Otherwise, I won't need willingness. So I'm looking at this willingness. And of course I'm willing because I've seen all this stuff. You know, am I now ready to have God remove the things which we've made objectionable? Sure. Of course I am. I think they're going to be removed. I think because I've done this 5th step, that I've exposed this work, probably the most important thing I've done in my life up until this point, that, man, I am looking forward to what's next. Can he now take them from me, every one, you know? If we still cling, which I have circled and big box around it, to something will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Now, if I cling to something, that means that I've already asked to have this be let go. So there is these, you know, first of all, too, I also want to say this is not a legal document. This is an experience of somebody putting down an experience so someone else can maybe have the same experience. And I think what I like about what we do in these meetings is that we try to do the work in the same way so everyone is familiar with the same language. But we're not going to have the same exact experience, but we're all familiar with each other's experience. And so if I'm clinging, that means I've already acknowledged that I need to let go of this. So I'm going to do 6 and 7 more than once if I cling, if I'm going to get into the legality of what this says. But I don't, again, it's not a legal document. We ask God, help us be willing again. So I need to be willing. That's my job. But part of that willingness is that when I see this, that I ask for the help. As sobriety progressed, I began to see in advance where I needed to ask for help. When I would go to work in the morning, I would already be thinking about that guy in work that I want to punch in the face. I'm already having an argument with somebody anticipating what they're going to say. So I need to be willing at that moment to pause and invite God in before I'm actually clinging to this thing. So then we get into the prayer. You know, when we're ready, we say something like this, you know. So I said exactly this, but I say things that are something like this as well. I can shift this around based on what's going on in my situation. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. If you have a problem with saying my Creator, just say whatever you want. You know, I believe God's my Creator because I believe that something created this universe. I didn't create it, but something created it, and I'm in the universe. I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. And the reason I'm giving over my good is because, me personally, my ego is so connected to it. I think I'm great at so many things. I give a great 2-hour talk on humility. And so I'm giving over the good and the bad. But also, the good of me is easily corruptible by these other character defects that I participate in. I pray that you remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you. So am I believing? I'm kind of believing that, all right, I'm definitely one of God's kids and I need to be useful to God's plan. I do believe in that. I do believe, I've always had this nasty feeling in the pit of my stomach. It doesn't come up much anymore, but I always had it. And I remember my meditation in journaling, I wrote down, it's as if the truth of who I was supposed to be was written on the lining of my stomach, and every time I went against it, I knew I went against who I was supposed to be in God's eyes. And I believed that Tommy Delaney was supposed to be a certain thing. certain person, act a certain way. When I was like 2 or 3 years sober, I thought that I was on a fault-finding mission, not a fact-finding mission. I was looking for all the fault in me, because naturally I must be bad. We're either good or bad. Instead of, I'm perfectly God's son, and I'm just maladjusted the way I live in this world. And so I have to, I really believe, like, I'm perfect the way I am today, but I don't perfectly align with all of you. And one of the things that I pray for in my life today is, God, help my moral compass align with the moral compass for those about me. Because I think every single person in this room truly believes at some point that they're doing their best. And why can't the rest of the world just see that? You know, how often do I want people to be accepting of me in my journey, in my struggles, but I'm not as accepting to them? You know, I expect you to be accepting of me because my life's so hard. I'm tethered to all these things that tell me my life is hard and your life is easier, and if I only had it like they had it, things wouldn't be as hard for me. So I'm constantly tethered to these lies. So I first want to have this relationship with God and be the person God intended me to be, but I don't know how to do that. I have no ability to force it. And when I was a couple of years sober, I thought I had to change everything about me because I was such a bad person. And I felt like I was in worse pain because I wasn't being myself. So I'm the guy, like, when we're all eating dinner and something, like, I'm the guy that instantly has the joke, the quip, the thing to say, whatever it is. Make people laugh at your expense. It's one of my favorite things to do, right? But at some point I realized I don't like being this guy anymore. I don't like this about myself. And so I tried to change it. Instead of saying, like, all right, maybe I don't have to be this guy all the time, but maybe I am the guy that says something funny once in a while. But, like, I would go against who I'm supposed to be. Now, I am that guy. And my wife and I were arguing about something. And she said to me, you forget that I'm the one with the photographic memory. And without skipping a beat, I said, yeah, but your lens is cracked. And it diffused the whole argument because she just said, how the hell do you come up with this shit, And but that's who I'm supposed to be, but not at the expense of others. And what I realized was, and the reason this comes into defects of character is, I am giving myself value by putting you down. My ability to make the table laugh at you is giving me this false sense of affirmation. And what I learned in these defects of character and shortcomings, and again, I don't want to get into the legality of this, and you'll hear people say, well, Bill didn't like to use the same word twice, and defects and shortcomings is the same thing. You can have your opinion of that. It doesn't really affect my opinion. And what became really comfortable for me is, so in 10 and 11, which I need to talk about a little because I'm constantly looking at where I come up short in my shortcomings, I realized that the shortcoming is where I come up short in my life, and the defect of character is what's inside me. So if I'm late for work, that's my shortcoming. The defect of character is the tardiness. I don't appropriate my time properly. And if I look a little deeper than that, I don't value your time more than my own. If I look a little deeper than that, in order for me to devalue your time, I'm somehow devaluing my integrity. And ultimately, at my core, I feel like a failure anyways, so I'm going to do these small things that validate that I'm going to be a failure and let you down. And the reason I love continually looking at 6 and 7 in 10 and 11 is because I have a greater understanding than what I had when I originally went to God with just my inventory and said, take this from me, I can't live like this anymore. I have sober, tangible experiences of how to live as a man with integrity. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be late for work sometimes. But it means is that I have a little more understanding of how I do the things I do. Why I continually, let my 5 minutes go. Yep. Why do I continually dip my toe in the water of these things that aren't serving me? Which gets into this prayer, I'm asking God to remove my these defects of character that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. the best way I can have a peaceful relationship with God is to have a peaceful relationship with my fellows. And I feel like for the most part I do. I've had a lot of different seasons in my sobriety. Been married, divorced, been engaged again, relationships ended, been betrayed, had financial successes, financial failures. Through all of it, I've been part of AA. And what I know to be true is that if I have a disturbance between me and my fellows, I have a disturbance between me and God. If I'm going to bed at night and I'm trying to have some communication with God, and I'm thinking about somebody that I owe an amends to, or I might not even owe them an amends. I've gotten comfortable with this thing where I remember calling somebody up one time and saying, hey, listen, I don't feel like I owe you an amends, but I just want to acknowledge that the discord between us. There's something going on. And I want to acknowledge that I know I play some sort of part in that. And then they talked about what was going on, and I talked about what was going on. And they thanked me because really what I was saying was, you're valuable in my life. And I don't know what I did, but I know there's a disturbance. How do I seek to not live in disturbance? So it's important that I have these things right with my fellows. And grant me strength. If I need strength, I know there's hard times ahead. If I need strength, I know that I don't have this on my own. And that's why I know there's no more power in me. There's only knowledge, and knowledge is probably more dangerous because I think I know what's right or wrong. I don't do this work so I become more powerful. I do this work so I can clear away the things that stop me from moving in the direction that my life is supposed to go and take care of the people I'm supposed to take care of. And I tell you right now, my life has never been more difficult, but also abundant at the same time. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And I've completed step 7. So, in my life today, I'm married. We've been together 15 years. My daughter's 14. My wife just turned in her resignation as a Boston public school teacher, walking away without a retirement. She can't do it anymore. I've been out with knee injuries for over almost a year and a half on workman's comp. I'm a project manager for a roofing company. I can't go back to my chosen trade. Financially things aren't where I would like them to be. But my wife and I have actually never been more excited about starting fresh because she's been living in a way where she knows that she can't do this anymore. It's killing her, and I know that it's not good for us. And the character defect in me is like, I'll instantly go to, can't you just grind it out for a few more years and get that 20-year retirement? Because I've been counting on that, like the way we utilize our money. Like we have a little cottage on Cape Cod. We live in Newton. Most of my money goes into other things. Her money, the retirement was my retirement plan as well, and it's the fear that I'm not going to be taken care of. The sun's out right now. Every single one of us, when we walk outside, there's going to be enough sun for all of us. I forget that. I think there's no sun for me. I think someone's casting a shadow on me. You're trying to take my sun. And that's what it's like to continue to live in these defects of character, these shortcomings, where I come up short in my life. And I go into 10 and 11, and I said, I look at my day like a pie chart. There's only so much time in the day. If I actively participate in better habits, there's less of a vacuum for poorer habits to come in. If I actively participate in thoughts that are grounded in the best for all concerned, there's less time for selfish, self-centered thoughts of how I'm not going to be taken care of. And that's my time. And I'll end with this. When I was new, my sponsor took me for a ride to go talk to a guy he sponsored. The guy was in trouble. he was in the kind of trouble you get into when you sleep with your secretary and you're married. And so my sponsor and this guy having this conversation, which was, I can hear it. I was sitting in the car and they were outside. All I heard is, you don't listen to a goddamn thing. You do whatever you want. You know, you're in this trouble. You know, what do you expect? And my sponsor's just, you know, not holding back. He wasn't giving him like a pat on the back saying, we'll get through this, you know, you'll be all right. He was letting him have it. And this guy was a wealthy doctor, obviously highly educated. And my sponsor got back in the car and he said, you know, there's 3 major obstacles I've seen for people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And one is a little bit of money. They think they can buy their way out of this thing. 2 is an overdose of education. They think they're too smart for this. And the other is like some charm and charisma. They think they're going to schmooze their way through life. And my sponsor looked at me and says, you, my boy, have nothing to worry about. And he was right on. I had nothing going on. And I pray the same for you. Thanks.